It's required that we have a deputy, or just each one.
Both of us being former deputies that did nothing.
Right, that's what I'm saying. I don't think deputies typically do anything.
We learned from that experience that that probably isn't the best way to operate. And actually with the canvas, that
Yes.
just stuff the envelopes. Learn a little bit about the office. They're not there to do the day-to-day, but they are much more familiar with what goes on in the office than what Mark and I were.
Oh, I think that makes sense. Thank you.
So your initial ask was for $123, almost $124,000. After went through the board of selectmen, we were reduced to we'll call it 114. And last year's size budget was at 119,000. Small increase. The board of selectmen had it's up to almost just about a $5,000. Question?
Yeah, my only question is, food, when we're doing all this early voting, do we need to supply these people with food? Is there some law that says we have to supply the voters, the workers with food? I mean, I have to bring my lunch to work every day. 14 days of buying food for people seems to be a lot. Right, I realize that, but
General election. I get 52 people. 16 days. Maybe longer. So all the folks are in there to be there before the polls are open. It's a long day. They can't, really, they're kind of tethered to the job there.
They can't leave
They can't leave.
the building. They can't leave the spot, really.
They shouldn't, yeah. It's just, it's an enticement. I like to be able to say, you know, feed you, I guess, with work and you're on the fence. You know, plus, this, well, at least this probably will happen. But, you know, the last time we had early voting on Mother's Day. I try to hire somebody on Mother's Day, all retired, older people there. And Denise is a fine example. Her mother is 93 years old. She didn't work Mother's Day. And I don't blame her, but you know, we like to be able to say, a lot of towns, there's some towns that do that. Say, bring your lunch. But you know,
Not very many.
not very many. Most people do feed you. And it's not, we don't get, you know, ribeye and it's just top sirloin and Ruth Chris Steakhouse.
I can see that.
The rest, you know.
We've been very, very creative
Yeah, so-
in trying to bring down the amount
Yeah.
of, that we're paying
Yeah.
in food costs because of the 14 days. It is a lot, but they don't make a lot of money per hour. And they're there for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. We have tried to be very creative and
Just,
really.
yeah, small lunch and a little bit more.
Yeah, and I think too, just because this was also one of my thoughts too, and I've thought about it, but there's not really like for where can they put their food for the day? Like if they're bringing breakfast,
Right.
lunch and dinner, like they would take up the whole fridge.
Yeah,
And we don't have that room here, especially.
Yeah.
And it really is, they have a very short window of time that they can take dinner or lunch. They can't sit around and heat up dinner, and we do quick dinners and back to the spot. That's a good question, Tom. You can ask a lot.
Yeah.
The majority of communities that we talk to all provide meals.
and on the balance side of that too, we've had this, a couple of young ladies sitting in this room volunteered their time. So you save money on that, on their paychecks. So there's a give and take, and least I can do is buy lunch. And also, I mean, we should talk about the new tab. That it's like Star Wars. This keep our fingers crossed. I guess they're a lot more complicated than the old machine.
All on our dollar. I mean, the registrars make a basic rate of pay. And the training is coming out of what we make for the base pay for the registrars. And it's 2 days of conferences to try to figure this out, plus 2 days of training. I think there's gonna be 2 days.
Yeah.
So it's gonna be different. It's gonna be challenging across the board, not only for the registrars, but for the people that then
Yes.
we have to train
Moderate.
how to use the new programs. It's gonna be another very challenging year we're facing.
Yes. And they sent us 13 tabulators. We have 6
Now,
now. And then, but they're the old fashioned, they're like 17 years old and they're ready on their last legs, but 13. We asked them why.
we tried to get less
And they came up with some,
formula,
Formula,
magic formula.
yeah. And said that's what we need. They're a little bit slower, but that was one of their arguments. They scan every ballot and record it into the, correct me if I'm wrong with that, we got 10 or 12 thumb drives we gotta deal with.
Yeah.
It's gonna be a nightmare for a while.
Whole thing.
Yeah. But that's gonna be additional costs, I think, too. That we must look at.
So the machines themselves are supplied by
The state.
state.
Okay, yeah.
The state paid millions of dollars for these new machines. And we tried to get them to understand we're a small community that does not need 13, nor do we have space to store 13. We figured that out, of course, but it is what it is, and we have to deal with it, and we're going to have to maintain those 13. So don't be surprised if our maintenance costs go up next year if we have to.
The memory
Maintain
cards, don't they have the program that's 14 memory cards?
I think we're programmed.
We're programmed, okay.
From what I understand, instead of sending them out to a company to be programmed, we will get one program and then put it into all of the thumb drives. So it's gonna be, in fact, Amy Lamb, who is the best.
Yeah.
She's our best person to help us with all of that, came to us today
Mhm.
and struck fear in our hearts with, this is really scary. I don't know how we're gonna get this done. It's a lot. But it is what it is. We're gonna roll with it.
Yeah.
You know that Mark and I both inherited this by default.
Basically.
And we're going with it and we will continue, but it's not our fault. Things are-
Yeah, I just want to say thank you both for coming and sharing, and I do truly love how well the two of you work together. It's really,
We do.
Yeah. it's great. It makes it easier. So,
Yeah.
Experience was, I was a mechanic with the old, that's how far back. Abraham Lincoln.
Any further questions? The board? Thank you much for your time.
Thank you for your
Thank
time. Thank you.
Okay. Next up, we have the Wellbrook Fire Department. And that budget information was on the table we got here tonight, or emailed to you. Us, and they also gave us a breakdown tonight in the tables.
What I want to do.
Want me to turn on the presentation or the presentation? Just the presentation.
You want to get Jay? Yeah, well, when I press there, yeah. You should be able to. On one of your printouts so you can read.
I got a copy.
Okay.
I put together a PowerPoint,
Oh.
but just to highlight the increases, decreases, it's 7 or 8 slides.
Apologize.
So, our ask is 192,000 more than last year. Of that 192,000, 153 of it is 100,000 for the CIP for new facility and 53,000 in the senior center costs that we're encumbering, heat, electricity, minor building maintenance, and internet. If we exclude that, our overall increase is only 3.9%. Obviously, we're asking for 19.1 if you add that other stuff back in. So we're really trying hard to keep it responsible. We really feel strongly about that $100,000 for the new facility. We can't keep kicking the proverbial can down the road. The facility is gonna have to happen at some point, and that's just a start for it each year. If it takes 20 years for that facility to ever happen, that money that's in there can go to soft costs, bunks, computers, tables, chairs. It's never gonna build the facility. We're never gonna, it would take us many, many years to save that money to build an actual facility. So we're gonna have to get very creative, looking for maybe state aid, grants, something like that, because myself as a taxpayer, I'm not gonna foot the whole bill. Our department is, with the exception of a couple of people that live outside of town and a handful of junior members, they're all taxpayers in town. They all share the same burden everybody else is. And we really think that we put together a pretty responsible budget. Jason? So, like I said, building maintenance and CIP at the top. The cable and internet, 4,300. Firefighter incentive is up 20,000. We took in 15 new members by the grace of God. Double-edged sword though. You're bringing more volunteers, but that drives your equipment prices up. Schooling for them, the incentive program as they respond to calls, they go to training. So that's why that increases there. Dues and fees. We've talked about this in previous years. They increased the cost for firefighter one and EMT on top of having these brand new members that aren't even certified as firefighters that are gonna have to go through schooling. We had to increase that line. The part-time staff compensation was mainly raised on the 27th week, increasing that, and the new state of Connecticut sick time law. And that 8,800 is based on last year's hours, what they would have accumulated in sick time that they're gonna be able to take. So that's what's driving that. Next slide, Jason. Our firefighter annuity went up a little bit. Our liability and accident plan insurance, payroll taxes, supplies and equipment, very minimal fee, $950, professional services, workers' comp. So that, all those increases equal to 205, 166, and then you deduct, our dispatching fees went down, and we cut our fire marshal salary, 3,000, which brings us to the 192, 166. I can tell you right now that the dispatching fees are underfunded at this proposal, because after this was submitted and signed, we ended up encumbering the EMS calls into our budget, which raised it another 4,000. So it's actually, we asked 16, I think it's the actual cost ended up being just a little over 20,000. So it's gonna go up a little over 4,000. We can take that out of our unfunded balance line if we have to make that up. But there's nothing left over at the end of the year. Jason? Oh, yeah.
And again,
So, just a little bit on the facility. We've talked about it. If you've attended the H2M presentation. We're just. The firehouse we're in now was 120% better than where we came from. Some of you may remember it down at the old mill. But it wasn't built for today's firefighting. Gender equality, our female force keeps rising each year, keeps going up. The current plot of land doesn't allow for growth and expansion. The facility does not support the members' health and safety. Members nowadays should be able to come back if they so choose, and we encourage it to, if they're in a fire with all the carcinogens, if they're on medical call and they're kneeling in bloodborne pathogens, actually it happened the other day. They responded to an EMS call and the place was pretty deplorable. Luckily, the staff that was on lived in town. They were able to go home and change. Most of our daytime staff doesn't have that ability. They're from wherever. They should be able to come back, decon, whether it's take a shower, change their clothes. We don't have a shower. We have an emergency shower that doesn't even work. And some non-ADA compliance issues. Jason? Lack of storage and equipment. I encourage anybody that's interested in coming down and take a look at the facility. We're crammed in there. It's like putting 10 pounds of in a 5-pound bag. We're getting increasing cracking in our concrete floors where the apparatus are. That needs to be addressed at some point. And like I said, no showers for members of the decon. Jason? That's really it in a nutshell. That's what we're asking for. Those are the increases and the decreases. Entertain any questions?
Chief, just real quick, it's important to note too, the building was built in 1980. And at that time, Broadway Fire Department was averaging just a little over 100 calls. What was our call run total, 850 or 850 last year?
Yeah, somewhere around 850.
8 times the workload for a facility that was designed for less than what it's currently facilitating right now. That's a big ask. And from the commission side, I'll just say that the health safety of our firefighters, it's not like hey, we're threatening or anything else. It's a real danger. People are coming back with carcinogens on them. They have no place to decon at all. These are volunteers predominantly. So that's a big problem. We have to take care of our first responders.
So, right, $100,000 isn't going to do that now. So, my question is, like, do we have space to put in a shower? Like,
No.
is there any?
H2M, when they did their study, they assessed all of that. It's not feasible. That was a professional architectural study that came back and said it's just not feasible with the space that you have right now. And there's no room for expansion.
The other problem that you end up having is once you start making additions to the building, it's gonna have to be brought up the code.
Right.
Which is gonna cost far more than just putting in a shower. And I just hate to throw money at a building that eventually is, needs to be replaced.
But it's more than showers too, because when you come back from a call, if anybody's familiar with hazardous materials, the way it's supposed to work, you have a hot zone, right? So all of our firefighters are in the hot zone. When they come back, they're supposed to go to a warm zone where they decontaminate. And that includes their gear. And then they go into the cold zone, which is a decontaminated area, which doesn't have PFAS, which is the major carcinogen. Even if they took a shower, their gear getting taken out and all that PFAS is just going off all over the place.
So they come back, basically, they strip down as much as they can. The goal of that whole hot, warm, cold zone is so that you're not bringing all that stuff into where your offices are, your bedroom is, stuff like that, and where you're eating dinner. And that's another reason why, they should be able to decon prior to getting in their car, because then you're dragging that stuff into your car. Then your wife and kids are in the car. It spreads, and there's studies on that.
70% higher average for cancer rates. study shown.
So, but it's the intent of the 100,000 is that it would sit there.
So the intent of the 100,000, the initial 100,000 is to get us set of plans, so we can get an actual hard number
Okay.
of what this facility is gonna cost. And then each year after that, yes, the 100,000 will sit there and it will grow and it'll grow and it'll grow. But we need a set of plans. We need a hard cost of what this facility is gonna be. So if we're ever lucky enough to lobby and get state bonding or find grants, we need to know how much it's gonna be. We can't go and say, we think we need this much money. They're gonna say, well, you can think all you want and crap in your other hand. We need the hard number to say, this is what we need. Oh, we have an opportunity here. We know how much we need. And if it sits on the shelf for 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, 40 years, then that's gonna have to sit on a shelf. But then you can just take it off the shelf and apply it to new world cost, building construction cost, and you have your numbers. The plans and the costs aren't gonna ever go away. You know, they're gonna change. The costs will fluctuate. But we need to get those plans.
I guess my question would be, if we give you this 100,000 for the plans and to get shovel ready, and then we give you $100,000 every year, we're gonna have to spend money on getting this building somewhat compliant in the next 10 years. If it's gonna take you 8 to 10 years to get a building. We can't leave it the way it is now. So we're gonna spend more money to at least get it up semi-compliant.
And we can try and get creative with that, and we'll have to work with the building official. You know, if we end up saving in 5 years or 3 years, $200,000 or $300,000, $400,000, you know, maybe we can do something. I'm not sure what 100,000 is gonna do, but
Gary, I think that the bigger point is $100,000 is the set of plans to get shovel ready. And we need to be prepared. And I know everybody's saying 5, 10, we need to be prepared to go forward with getting funding for a new facility sooner than later. So that we're not putting good money after bad or bad money after good or whatever you want to call it, right? We need a new facility. That's the bottom line. The studies have shown that. The architects looked at it. There's not any real good way to retrofit that building, be safe for our firefighters, to bring it up to ADA compliance, to be gender equity. So it's gonna have to be a burden cost that has to be borne at some point. So we keep pushing this problem down the road, or we can address it and take care of our firefighters.
Did the architect give a ballpark figure for?
For the cost, there was a range, but it depends on a lot of factors. So it's hard to say, but you can say with the ballpark.
I think it was between 15 and 20 million.
But there are ways to look at that with the architect, depending on different ways to fabricate and build. There's different ways to look at that cost and work with them to bring it as low as we can for the needs. But then again, there's trade-offs, right?
Yeah.
You know, it's making sure that the building is gonna be something that lasts for another 80 to 100 years. You wanna make sure that that facility stands. And at that point, though, once we have the plans, like Chief is saying, that's when we can go in for all the other funding mechanisms that we can have available that we can't even approach right now.
At years, 15, 20, probably 30, 40.
Yeah, it's just gonna keep compounding, obviously. You know, we don't have to tell you guys that, you know that. Nothing's getting cheaper. But, you know, like I said, as taxpayers, we know that we're not gonna be able to foot the whole bill. There's gonna have to be some creativity. We're gonna have to lobby, we're gonna have to look and try and get creative and trying to find some funding. I'd like to see at least, at a minimum, 2/3 of it cost by some kind of funding outside.
We did talk about, even if we do have to find a way to do debt services, that $100,000 lives in the CIP. That can also support the funding for debt services down the road as well.
Alrighty, any other questions? Something to think of there.
Thank you all for
Yeah.
all that you do.
I do want to point out something that Chief said that just should be, stomp its foot because it deserves a recognition, is that this is a volunteer fire department, and there is still a good steady stream of volunteers. And that actually keeps funding way lower than it would be if we didn't have volunteers. So that's something that we should recognize, the department's efforts, but also the community. We owe it to the community that's volunteering to take care of it. Thanks.
Yeah, we appreciate your continued support. Again, we hope that you send it through and let our constituents say any day or nay. And then we can go back to the drawing board if they don't like it. Thank you.
Thank you. That leads us to the Board of Education budget. That's fine.
We were a little unique in that we presented last week, just kind of recap. The Board of Ed app is 6.34%. The primary factors are medical, which is 9.8%, transportation 6%, and special ed almost 8%. So certainly those are our primary drivers, along with loss of one-time funds. Certainly, I know you've had time to review our information. Certainly, I know this board certainly does their research and anticipate questions and, effort and full transparency. Want to provide whatever information is on your decision making.
I have some things, Mark, but if someone wants to start, can pass mine off and speak with them.
If you, I was just one question, so I know there were some reductions in staffing that you presented. Are any of those positions currently filled?
They are vacancies that will not be filled.
Okay. Thank you.
Yes.
Oh,
Just my usual question, how many students?
District wide, 1,050.
we anticipate that number changing much for next year?
We do not. I mean, our the demographic enrollment study shows a slight increase over the 10 years of 100 total students. So that's about 8 per grade level. So not a decrease, but a slight increase.
Are we seeing any changes in the number of students staying, moving into the high school as opposed to leaving?
It's pretty much been stagnant. So I wouldn't say a decrease, but I wouldn't say an increase either.
Okay.
Any comments before?
The students graduated last year, and what's the percentage of their graduation rate?
So I believe it was approximately 50. I can get you the actual number that graduated last year. I want to say our graduation rate, and it's, so I'll preface it. I want to say it's between 85 and 85 to 90%, somewhere between there. I will say one factor that negatively impacts that number is students that are in our special ed transition program. So that's our 18 to 22-year-old program that require mandated services. Unfortunately, count against us with that number. So I do want to add that bit of information. We do go back and forth regarding the equity with that calculation, but that does factor that calculation.
If you have something to say it.
I was just curious, do you have any idea where we're ranking in the state
And like what regard?
for top to bottom?
I mean, so
Are we
the
number-
state doesn't rank, I can tell you, like among alliance districts. So that's usually our comparison group. And that represents about 44% of all students in Connecticut. We're in the top third of alliance districts. And when you look at our growth over the last 3 years, we're in that highest tier. I can tell you that myself and assistant superintendent were one of 3 school districts that were asked to participate in a forum at the legislative building this Friday, specifically on our reading instruction and our growth with the Commissioner of Education, among others. So certainly we know our achievement level, but that being said, we are moving the bar up, and we continue to do it each year, and we've continued to do that since I've been superintendent.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I went through your comparison report, the Munis report that was supplied to us, kind of line by line. And one of the things that, I'm not laughing because it's the descriptions, I know it's just a certain amount of space you're given. So there's obviously a few things in there that kind of, some of them, like one of them I thought might be in-house suspension, but why would you have in-house suspension in the Broadbrook Elementary School, right? So, there's just a couple, like one of them, the 2024 actual number is 473. It says BBE Gen SUP.
That's general.
General supplies, okay. So now the 2024 number was 473, but now the 26 number, I mean, obviously supplies is, I don't think he had only $473 worth of supplies in 24 actual. So is that just still, we're adjusting our accounting from the old system to the new system in 24?
Some of it was the pre-spend from the year prior as well.
Okay.
And I did put in a ticket or two with Munis. I've been trying for a couple of years now for them to put the full account on the year to like the comparison, and unfortunately it abbreviates it.
Yeah, well, I mean, full disclosure, we just switched to a new accounting system where I'm my place of employment, and I'm loving all the new abbreviations for everything myself. It's like, I've worked with this other system for 12, 13 years, and now there's like new names for everything, so. Anyway, so going down through, like, and just another thing I get, I'm assuming BBE LIB is the library, and we haven't budgeted anything, but now it's 15,000, or is that something different? LIB, something different?
So that used to be, so that's the library supplies. So that used to be consolidated into a different line. So we broke it up for
Okay.
clarity. So
That's what I'm assuming some of these are.
yeah, you'll see that with a number of them, like some of the salary lines too, like you'll see a kind of larger number in years past, but we tried to kind of consolidate them.
Yeah.
For the new year as well. So
Some of them I could follow.
you'll see like, obviously Patrick is still here, but that's in a different, we're trying just to,
Yeah, some of them I was able to follow, but it's just,
Your in-school suspension is instructional supplies.
oh, okay. I had SSUB, I don't know, it's in school suspension.
when you make the account, like for the short one, I think it gives you like 9 characters, so that a couple of times I'm trying to Google, like, how else could I
Yeah, well, I noticed that.
abbreviate it, and that's kind of the close.
And I did notice when you go to EWMS, the last letter of some of the upper ones disappeared, so I assume it was just.
Yeah.
So, yeah, okay. And I assume Broadbrook tutors in 24, they were housed somewhere else. I mean, it's because like I said, that number is. I'm assuming it's tutor, but yeah, BBE tutor, so it's 5 an hour, it's like looking at 173 and again.
Yeah, we had some grant funding in the years past,
Okay, so we don't have the grant funding.
that and some people moving it as well.
Okay, that's. How much there? So let's see, which one was this one? And again, this is just, maybe just once the description comes out, it's under the high school. DUESF.
Or do you,
Dues and fees.
Dues and fees, oh, okay, that would make sense. Again, they just doubled from a few years back, and I've just, just one of those things that just stuck up to me that I was looking through it, that's all.
Here's a question. So I know you mentioned pre-spending, so that means, so last year, any budget that you had left before the fiscal year ended, you did a pre-spend, you know how much that was?
no, not from last, so
Oh.
he was looking at the 2024 actuals, so like basically from
Okay.
23. So if you had pre-spent like 2 years prior, obviously that number's gonna look a little bit lower, and that this is more of like our true expenditures now that we're pre-spending anymore.
Okay, thank you for the clarification.
Again, this is probably something that was just under another line item, but it's under high school, it says MTUT.
So that is the math tutor.
Math tutor, okay, so is that's something you've added in the last.
Correct, yeah, yes. That's, that's along with some increases with special ed. Is, so the superintendent's proposed budget was at 5.44 in January. Obviously, we're at 6.33. Our special ed costs have increased since that time, along with adding that.
Yeah, some of these I'm asking are just for some clarification. Just like I said, I'm looking at things we haven't had in the past that we're having now. And sometimes I can follow that the money moves. You can see one category went down, one went up.
Yeah.
But that one, I didn't quite follow where that one may have come from. So.
Nope, that's a brand.
Yeah, okay. Gotcha. And if special education, obviously, transportation is going up a lot. Is that because we're sending more away or?
No, the cost is increasing at an insane rate. I can tell you that's a very popular topic in legislative session, special ed costs in general. So for example, and this is a transportation, but it's a private placement. Well, we received notification that a school rate of per day currently is $3.99. It's moving up to $4.70 next year. But that's just one example of what we are commonly seeing in special education. So I'll use other states, for example, just across the border in Massachusetts, they have regulations, they have rate setting. Connecticut does not have rate setting. So I know it's something that's being proposed in current legislation. Honestly, I don't see it passing, but what I do see is a study coming and maybe it being rate setting. But that's not unique to East Windsor. Certainly, we have concerns about the sustainability about those cost increases, but that's across everywhere with every board of ed right now.
So when you say that the cost increased to $470 per day,
Yep.
That's for one student to go.
Yep. So you take that 70, and if it's 190 days, or some students are on 220 days, you multiply it, and that's a total dollar amount. For one student, yes.
And how far are they traveling? Just out of curiosity. If you can't say, you can't say. But
That one, 15 miles.
$470 a day.
Yeah. Yeah, that was the school cost. That wasn't the transportation cost. But we see similar increases with transportation.
Oh, okay. So the school cost is $470, not the transportation cost. Okay, I'm sorry. So,
Deirdre, what's the range for transportation a day? Yeah,
Yeah,
what's the low rate to the high rate?
120 a day to 360 a day.
Okay, all right.
Depending on student.
Yeah, the cost of transportation in special education went up $120,000, which is actually percentage-wise way more than what the total school one is. And that's just one of the things that stuck out to me. And then the tuitions, that would make, because that's $113,000, if I'm doing my math quick in my head right, more than last year's. And that's the line right below the special ed. So those are what you just were addressing. So the 470 is the whole.
Correct.
I can't, all right, maybe I just missed that beginning of the conversation. Okay.
So I do have another question. So just one thing, right, with the town side, right? Like I know that everyone went through their own budget process already. What was the original ask from the schools versus what you're proposing to us?
Are you saying from the January to?
Like what was the original ask? So like all of your schools came with a proposed budget and then you go and you look at cuts, before you propose it to us. Were there any adjustments made?
It's kind of done. So it's done in real time. Certainly they bring things forward, back and forth discussion. But relatively sometimes circle back. I think probably the easiest way would be if we rolled everything over and as is, we didn't reduce anything. For example, we reduced a school nurse, we did the 5 paras. We could look at the total cost, but we'd be reducing those would be our recommendations regardless, because those are based on need too. We have less of a need for a nurse, so we should be close. Although our special ed costs have increased in other places, the staffing that was required to service those students no longer exists. So I know that doesn't directly answer it. But it is a collaborative process.
Yeah, no, I guess I was just more curious, right? Because I know like the selectmen, when they review it, they made cuts to the, and we can see that transparently, like what was asked and what they cut before they brought it to us. I don't see that here, so I was just curious.
I mean, certainly we reduced, I mean, staffing that we reduced. I mean, there's other costs that, I mean, like the football transportation costs, we eliminated that, so there, I mean, there's several examples, but. Certainly I can get that.
Thank you.
And just going through special ed again, I assume special ed administrative, the last one on page 2, this was nothing was budgeted, but this year is $306,000. That's, I assume that's moving a position from somewhere else in the budget to there.
Yeah, so those positions were previously in what district, what district? Separated by department.
Okay. And then also and again, this may have been grant dollars or something, because it's, and maybe I'm just misreading it. It says, and I assume it's special ed education and private tuition. And 24 was a minus 118, and now it's 1.192. So I'm assuming there's grant dollars in that, or?
So a function of that is because we used to, like my first year and in years past, they would do choice and directly offset the actual private tuition line. So we're trying to show the true cost now, so we actually moved that out of it. So obviously our overall private tuition wasn't a negative back then, but we're trying to move the revenues into the other line now.
Okay.
So but essentially what you would see is when the revenue wouldn't show up, it would be, so I'll use an example. If a student's program was 100,000 and there was a revenue to offset it, that would be applied and would show up as, let's say if it's 80,000 now, offset, it would show up as 20. Now the full cost shows, but the revenue is just on one straight line, so it's one straight offset. Is that correct?
So I'm assuming below there's an HTFD and an EC line that have a negative below. That's some of the offset to those.
Harvard.
Yeah, so yeah, that's what you're saying. So that Harvard, the HTFD is the Harvard Choice Special Ed Services, and then EC was excess cost. So like Patrick was saying, in years past, they would basically reduce the private tuition line by that amount, where now you'll see the true amount, and then you'll see the revenue line kind of netting it out.
So when I add those, it's like almost 890,000-ish, 870. So that would kind of offset that 1 point.
About 1, and then it would look much smaller.
I would have thought, but just wanted clarification. Sorry to keep asking questions, but I guess that's what my job is. And let's see, so then that's moving down to facilities. Things look fairly consistent there, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, that was fairly consistent. Actually looked down a little bit. The only one I saw again, nothing was budgeted in 24, and it said DW, custodian, SUP, I'm assuming. It's
Yep, so that's district-wide custodial supplies. So same thing
Okay.
that previous year we was pre-spending to help get us to that number in the next year.
Gotcha. All right. Let's see here. Oh, let's flip the technology. Just kind of rolled around. There's nothing super that stuck out there. Well, actually, yeah, well, it was down, it was up, it was down. So just assuming it's just buying equipment or moving supplies around.
No, it was actually, so we, one of the things we did with, the 3-year like ESSER grant is, we offset, our technology over the last 3 years,
Okay.
essentially supplanting.
Yeah.
So we allocated a certain amount to bring it down. The actual cost is actually down 12,000, I believe.
Yeah, it's down a little bit, yeah.
But, certainly, last year was the last year we could, or this current year was the last year we could apply that grant
Okay.
to offset the cost.
Gotcha. All right, and I guess, like I said, I see the assistant superintendent disappeared, but he's still here, so. He just moved somewhere else?
Yes, yep, it's a district.
It was, no, it said, the old one is under general school fund, so he just moved to the district-wide side of things.
So he now, he now lives under the one that's CENTOP, so Central Operations,
That's on the group or just,
district wide.
okay. Let's see, yep, I see it, central operation. Okay, that was the other one I had started, so it's. Good. Under general, again, ADM travel administrative travel, I'm assuming doubled from 16 to 35.
Yeah, and that's just due to in the past, we had as you know, a number of things that were in other lines. So that's our true cost of like mileage reimbursement.
Okay. Transportation, you spoke to that one earlier. Nurses, I did notice the moving around and sense the reductions like you talked about. Athletics. And I see where you had the extra dollars you used from saying tuition dollars, it looks like was funding you don't have available this year, so. All right, well, that kind of answered the questions I had, just going through it line by line and looking at certain categories. Anybody else? Yeah.
I was just gonna ask one quick question. In terms of going back to the facilities piece, you're holding the repairs for each of the buildings at 55 each. In terms of like what was in this, is that basically what that's going to cover some of those highlights that you had in here? So like painting hallways, bleacher maintenance plans, is that kind of what's buried in those numbers?
It is, I mean, I think that's, let's speak to that a little bit.
Yeah, that's the upkeep of the maintenance throughout the schools, anywhere within electrical, plumbing, anything that, you know, for any school.
And you're fairly confident that 55 is a good number for each building?
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, I sat with Kyle a bunch on that. We tried to look back and as you know, we're building
Just thinking
historical
like
data.
historical,
But
yeah, what we've seen.
yeah, from what we can tell, we think that's a safe number. The other thing to keep in mind too is we do have, it's abbreviated DW ground SU. So there's a ground supplies line too. So what we've been using that for, so that would be any like kind of outdoor, ground supplies, anything with, the fields and things like that. So there is some money allocated there as well.
Anything else? Well, good.
Has there been like a study done on why the per student cost is higher than surrounding similar towns? So meaning like same special ed or low income?
Yeah, so I mean, why I can speak to that is, if you look at our per pupil, like at each of the schools, it's much lower at the elementary and middle school. So there's a lot of benefits as far as being a small school district, as far as community based. But if you are going to offer a competitive curriculum, the other side of that is you are going to have small class sizes, and you're also going to have a higher per pupil. To speak to that a little bit though, because we are a high needs district too, we do receive quite a bit of grant funding and other revenue sources to offset. So like to use another school district similar size, East Granby, I believe, is just under 1,000. I think there are about 900 students. Their local taxpayers pay, I believe, about I could look it up, but it's about $2,000 more than East Windsor residents when you look at what the local taxpayer pays. And you can find that right on thank you, Ed site, as far as fiscal resources. So when you're looking at the local tax dollars, East Windsor is getting a pretty good bang for its buck, so to speak, in comparison to other school districts.
Yeah, I think it's a great question. I would love to dig in general, maybe, maybe that we're not gonna get this go round, but I would love, like, what Jason does with the town and compares us to other, similar towns. I think it would be nice to kind of see, like, where are we per pupil compared in between the services that we're offering, just so the taxpayer can kind of see, where their money is going and how we compare to those other.
Yeah, certainly can do that in the future.
And I was just gonna ask Nicole, were you like speaking to Patrick in terms of his process with the administrators, or were you talking about his budget in terms of like the Board of Ed looking at it?
Right, the Board of Ed looking at it. So when it looks like here, at least where like it says 2026, so the superintendent, I assume, and then 2026 BOS, BOE, I assume that means like what and I don't see any cuts made.
Yeah, we basically supported the superintendent's budget. We looked at the different things that he had proposed and the cost and the changing again with the 2% fund, being used to a certain percentage and losing some of the grant money or, certain things just not being available anymore, how things were set up. And we did have workshops about that, and we supported the math tutor. I mean, I think the Board of Ed put that back in when it was discussed not being, because at the high school, we think it's important to still kind of have that math support for students. So we did support the superintendent's budget if it was presented.
Okay. Thank you for the clarification.
Just one, I think, I forgot to ask when I was looking at special ed. A few years ago or a year ago, you were talking about, we still do a lot of the special ed stuff in town.
We do.
And so that's reducing our send out by a lot, I assume.
It does. I will say, but the ones that you do send out, those costs continue to skyrocket, both with tuition and transportation. And so certainly, big picture, I mean, it's not unique to East Windsor, but there definitely needs to be some like regulations around that within the state, similar to other states.
And this is one, and again, I'm sure you don't know, but I'm gonna ask it anyway. With the questions about what's happening in DC with dollars, do you foresee any potential impact to money we have that, I don't know how much of your budget is federal dollars or if it's any at all, but.
We do get quite a bit in title funds. It came up today. I was part of a superintendent's meeting. And everyone's expecting an impact, but they don't know what it is or who it's necessarily going to impact. So more to come in the next coming months is basically the feedback we got.
So you don't have any, so potentially we could pass this budget as you presented and you could still come up, if something happens, hypothetically, you still could come up a lot short, a little short, we don't know short.
Yes, correct. That being said, it doesn't provide any comfort. Pretty certain we would not be alone in that.
No, obviously, nobody's alone in that, but it just, obviously,
Yeah.
my interest is East Windsor, and whatever happens in South Windsor and Ellington, it doesn't affect me, I didn't do what happens in East Windsor is what affects me.
I mean, one note with the budget too is, this budget's a little unique in the sense that, we did, like past years since I've been superintendent, we have allocated every existing dollar. So we have what we believe will be what's projected as the remaining 2%. So there's about 100,000. In the past, if we had excess, and Amy can correct me if my understanding's not accurate, but because we budgeted our entire like contingency fund with the 2%. Anything unspent would stay in the 2%. Is that correct, Amy, versus like?
I guess that's how you would spend it, right? Because at some point, you're gonna have to start writing money out of that 2% fund. So you just spend what you need and then leave the rest
Yeah,
in there.
Yeah, so like in the past, if we had excess, that would be returned to the town. In this case, it would just stay in the 2%. So we anticipate or project, and again, it's only April 1st. But we have projected 100,000 that would remain in that. We did put that in this budget as to offset and lower the cost.
Very good. I'll just ask one more time if any board members had anything else come to mind. I thank you for your time and, actually, this is my 10th budget. And I think I said the last year, I do appreciate there, it's a lot easier to follow than it was when I first started in this position. I do greatly appreciate the effort you guys have put into making it more transparent and clear to us. And, that's very helpful to me and, glad.
We thank you for your time. Appreciate the effort you put in to understanding the BOE budget. We understand it's not the easiest process, and certainly recognize that you're in a tough position with the job you have to do. And again, we appreciate consideration for our requests.
Thank you. And we'll obviously we're gonna discuss the budget as a whole on the 10th, yes. So we will come back to this again, but just, I know we all made notes and whatnot, and we'll move things over and we'll just make the final decision, I guess, on that. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right. That is the last group we had to come through the workshop tonight. Oh, let's have an agenda really is board member comments and note that our next meeting would be on the
It should be the 7th.
Not the 14th, that's it. Here.
We added the content.
Yes, we did.
We did.
I'm sorry, 17.
Yes.
And
We still have the 14th scheduled, but don't intend to use it because of its April vacation. So the 7th will be a big night. We have all of the community services department, all of the public works department, all of the police department, emergency services, and then a lot of the selectmen related general fund stuff and debt, CIP and contingency.
then the 10th was pretty much basically to review the budget as a whole and make our final.
And I figured I wasn't gonna post that agenda until after the 7th.
Yeah, that's
So I can post it on the 8th and then we'll know what we really need to cover on the 10th.
that. Any other board member comments?
Nope.
Seeing none, do I have a motion to adjourn?
And you never asked. Randy had it. Although I would have assumed that she would have spoken.
Oh, there she is.
I'm good. It was a great presentation tonight, and I apologize for being late.
Okay. No problem. All right, I do have a motion to adjourn. Do I have a second? Meeting's adjourned. Thank you all very much.